Okay, and we are actually live now.
Welcome to Little House on the Prairie.
Oh, this is outstanding. It is outstanding. Y'all are the best. Okay, so we are here for the second installment of of the legacy and immigration talk collaboration between Brazen Legal and Dahlia Law Group. We have literally gone from coast to coast to try to cover as much of this work as we can. We kind of envision this to be a maybe a looser uh, type of popcorn conversation about immigration issues and legacy and estate planning that might apply to them. I am Jill Bates Moore. I am one half of Dahlia Law Group, and you ladies are.
I am Bianca Jordan. I am from Brazen Legal.
And I'm Alicia Holland, the other half of Dahlia Law Group.
I love how Bianca says, "Well, I'm from Brazen Legal," like she doesn't own the joint. Like it's not her whole thing.
Legal. Yeah.
I'm the representative that they
Right.
sent for
It's like
today.
I just work here, you know. so so this week or over the past week and a half, there have been some pretty insane highs and lows in the immigration sphere. We are going to count on Bianca to summarize some of those for us because Alicia and I don't know what in the world we're talking about with that. But what once she does that, I think what everybody is going to see is just the sense of proactiveness, right? Like plugging into this proactive energy that frankly had is just the moment that we're in, right? Like everybody is getting active in some way about the things that impact our lives, and the immigration space is no different. And legacy has a good bit to do with some of the motivation, some of the reason for that. So we're going to talk about it. Bianca, what had happened?
A lot. How much time do I have? 'Cause, I joked and said that when it comes to immigration, this is a very depressing game of shoots and ladders because last week the Supreme Court gave us some really good news, and then the occupant felt like he needed to rain on everybody's parade. So for the benefit of those that maybe aren't familiar, the Supreme Court actually a week ago
A week
exactly,
ago today.
decided in favor of the Dreamers. So a little bit of a backstory just for the benefit of people who don't really know what DACA is. So many years ago, there were a group called Dreamers, and they're categorized as children that came to the United States, or people that came to the United States as children. So this could be people whose parents crossed the border with them, and they had no papers. This could be people that had a visitor's visa and came to the United States with their parents, but then their visitor's visa expired and they stayed behind. They stayed in the United States. So they were here undocumented. They had been rallying and trying to get Congress to give them some type of immigration benefit that would lead them to get citizenship. Because right now, under the current immigration laws, if you come to the United States undocumented, you cannot get a green card. You cannot adjust your status. You would have to go back to your home country, which for a lot of people, that's not a big deal. It's actually just going through consular processing, which is getting a green card, just doing your interview overseas. But if you come to the United States with no papers and you overstay, or you're in the United States undocumented for 6 months or over a year, then when you leave the United States, you can't come back for 3 years or 10 years, depending on how long you overstayed. So, and also you can't, unless you have a waiver, and not everybody qualifies for a waiver because you can't get a waiver just because you want one. You have to have a qualifying relative that you're showing would suffer some form of extreme hardship if they weren't able to come back to the United States. So the Dreamers were lobbying Congress to try to get some sort of legislation that would enable them to have a path to citizenship, or getting a green card or some type of legal status without their having to go outside of the United States and possibly be barred from ever coming back. So one thing that happened was President Obama ended up having a provisional unlawful presence waiver created, so that would enable people whose only ground of inadmissibility was the fact that they had no status, or they overstayed a visa and were in the country illegally for more than a year, or maybe they came here unlawfully to begin with. Once you get that waiver, you can go overseas to your embassy, get your green card, and be able to come back and not have to wait that 3 to 10 years. The other thing that he did was created the DACA program, which is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And again, that was for people that came to the United States as children. And this policy went into effect, I believe, if I remember correctly, I want to say it was 2012. I was still in law school, so yeah, it was 2012. And under this program, if you came to the United States before 2007, before you turned 16, and you either had no status or your status had at least expired as of that date, then you'd be able to apply for DACA, provided you were still in school, or you had finished school, or you were in the military, or honorably discharged, and you didn't have any major criminal records or anything like that. So that went into effect 2012, which was great for a lot of these people who they've been in this country their whole lives. It's the only country they know. They were able to get DACA. And under DACA, it's Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. The deferred action being you're not going to get deported for whatever period of time that your action is deferred. So in this case for DACA, it was 2 years. So for 2 years, you had protection from deportation, and you also were able to apply for a work card so that you can at least work in this country legally, have lawful status. And at first, you were also able to apply for something called advanced parole, which would enable you to travel back to your home country and come back. And that was really important, especially for people that came in the country illegally in the first place, because now they had that lawful entry that would now enable them to adjust their status to get a green card and eventually become U.S. citizens. So in 2014, President Obama decided he wanted to expand this program. So initially, the first program was you had to be here before 2007. Under the expansion, he said that anybody who was here in the United States before 2010 could apply. So that opened it up to more people. Additionally, he expanded it to enable deferred action for parents of people that were either green card holders or U.S. citizens. As you can imagine, the Republicans, conservatives lost their minds over this. They were like, nope, we're not having it. What Obama is doing is illegal. This is not okay. He's trying to extend an immigration benefit to people that should not have it. So Texas and about 26 other states decided to sue in federal court to try to get an injunction on DAPA. And they succeeded. And then over the years, long story short, it's just been going back and forth through different federal courts. Some federal courts were enjoining it. And finally, in June of 2017, this administration, which, Obama's gone and we have what we have now, this current administration pretty much said, we're not doing DAPA. And then a couple months later, Jeff Sessions announced that DACA would be ending effective September 5th, 2017. And they just said everybody has until October 5th, 2017 to apply and renew your DACA, and that's it. And so as you can imagine, that was not really, you didn't give a lot of people notice. You pretty much said, we're doing this, and that's it. So over the past couple of years, it's been going back and forth through federal court, and it made its way up to the Supreme Court because the way in which this administration went about ending DACA was unlawful. So you can't just end something or create a law.
Hold on one second, Bianca. Something is happening sound-wise, and I'm not sure if is there, can you move your microphone? Because I really don't want people to miss this part. This is super important.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Okay, try again for me.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. All right. I still kind of hear a little something, but I don't know if it's me or I don't know. But so basically, when you want to either enact a law or change something, you have to show why you're doing it. You can't just say, I want to end DACA because I feel like it. And it has to go through the Administrative Procedures Act, which is basically a law that governs how laws and regulations have to be made. They have to go through a comment period, typically, which could be 30 days, 60 days, what have you, where the public gets an opportunity to voice their opinions on the proposal. And so when DACA went into effect, Obama did that. President Obama went through the proper channels. He didn't for DAPA. I'm not really sure why. Maybe he figured since DACA was already approved through that process, maybe, and he was just expanding it, that maybe he felt like he didn't need to. But for whatever reason, he didn't go through those proper channels before. So the Supreme Court, with the DACA case, needed to basically determine whether they even had jurisdiction to review something that the president wanted to end, and if so, was the ending of DACA lawful? And the Supreme Court decided that it does have jurisdiction to review a decision from the executive office, and also that it violated the APA, which is the Administrative Procedures Act, because they just ended DACA, didn't really consider possibly, keeping some parts of it. They kind of just ended it with no rationale whatsoever. We have like 800,000 people with DACA right now. The financial impact alone would be devastating if all 800,000 of these people had to just up and leave. A lot of them are working. They're working lawfully in this country, contributing to Medicare and Social Security. A lot of people with DACA were doctors on the front lines helping us with COVID. You can't just kick these 800,000 people out. And so the Supreme Court on Thursday said that you can't do that, and at least for now, DACA is safe.
So this, just for my edification, and also, y'all like what I did there? I try to use one 50-cent word a day. And that was it. I just blew my whole big word budget on the one word. But yeah, just for my information, and also for anybody watching who might have the same question, my ears perked up when you said that when the protections of DACA, when that umbrella of DACA was expanded to include folks to basically extend the time period from 2007 to 2010, so an additional 3 years of eligibility, and then to also cover the parents of people who arrived in the U.S. as children and so would be protected by DACA. That seems huge. And also this Supreme Court ruling that, I know I'm talking with my hands, but that's who I am. But this Supreme Court ruling that says basically the presidential administration cannot simply end DACA in this particular way, and so DACA remains intact. Is it the extended DACA that includes 2010 and includes the parents that is protected, or what are the parameters of the protection right now?
It's the original DACA, so
Okay.
Not including parents, not including people up to 2010, because this administration ended that in June of 2017. They said we're not even going to do that.
Okay.
So the other thing that's important to understand is that these were done by executive order.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not Congress acting, because God forbid Congress do what we elected them to do. So everything that has to be done is at least under the Obama administration, it had to be done under executive order, because they made it clear to him on day one that they weren't going to cooperate with him. So he had no choice but to do something on immigration through an executive order.
Okay. So 800,000 people who have qualified for some iteration of DACA. Is that 800,000 number including their families, you think? Does that estimate include the families that are impacted, or just the people, just the childhood arrivals folks who arrived as children themselves?
So that's what's tough. So people with DACA numbers have ranged from low 700s to 800, over 800,000. And I think the new number of 800,000 is people that now qualify for DACA. So in order to get DACA before, you had to be at least 16 years old. So there are a lot of people that weren't 16 in 2012 that now, or, like maybe they just now turned 16 and now they can qualify for DACA once USCIS does what they're supposed to, as far as starting to accept new applications. So what the Supreme Court upheld is the original form of DACA that existed before September 5th, 2017, which allowed people to file renewal applications for DACA as well as new applications for DACA and for advanced parole so they can travel, have a lawful entry when they come back, and possibly be able to adjust their status if they're now like married to a U.S. citizen, for example.
Okay. I guess I'm just sitting here marveling at how many people this impacts. And the reason I asked the question about whether the 800,000 was individuals or if it included their families, because if 800,000 just represents the individuals, then we are talking about millions of people.
Yes.
Essentially, right? I mean, because the whole nature of DACA is that one of the impacts of it is that there is a family that is, that is involved for the most part. I mean, I imagine that some children arrived to the U.S. alone, but not every single one. And so I guess I'm hearing a couple of things. I am hearing a persistence by the current presidential administration to shut down as much immigration flexibility as it can. I hear a persistence. Things don't just show up at the U.S. Supreme Court. That's not how that works. That's not how. What does the commercial say? That's not how any of this works.
That's not how any of this works.
Right. And so that is a level of persistence that I think merits our attention. And also, I am hearing that people have some options. Like that even though this Supreme Court decision has protected DACA in its current state for now, and we can talk a bit about what, whether we think there are going to be some further fights about it, or what we think those fights would be, because we can be pretty well assured there are going to be some further fights about it. But even though that protection exists for now, that this is not a time really to relax into the protection. People shouldn't be running around scared, but also people shouldn't be feeling quite as lulled into a sense of security as a decision like this, which is huge, by the way. I mean, not to take away at all from just how enormous the impact of this is, but it's still time to stay doing your work. Those are the two things that I'm hearing.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Alicia, you look like you're about to say something.
No, I was thinking the same thing that you were saying but you said it much more educated sounded. So what I heard was that this is a tarp on the hole on the roof, not a new roof in place. So we bought some time, but this is not the solution fix, that we don't have to deal with this again for many, many years. Right. And so what it leads me to thinking is, now that we know there is still work to be done, that this is not the end, empowering people so that they know what is the work that we do now when we're in this stage, that we've got some breathing room. So now what do we do?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think That's still also up in the air as well. I don't know if either of you saw the announcement or the response that USCIS put out. I think they did it on Friday in response to the Supreme Court decision. And I'll summarize it. They pretty much were like, the Supreme Court doesn't know what they're talking about, and we're not really going to follow it. And last I checked, I mean, I could be wrong. It's been a while since I did con law. I'm pretty sure the Supreme Court is the law of the land. So how are you going to tell the Supreme Court that, like, we're not going to follow what you're doing? And just the fact that they issue a statement like that is very dangerous, because my fear is, so the Supreme Court basically returned DACA to the original state, meaning people who have never applied before that qualify can do so, or they're supposed to be able to do so. Renewal applications can continue to be filed, and then you should be able to apply for advanced parole. But USCIS is pretty much saying, well, we're not really going to do that, or we're going to make it difficult for you. So one of my fears is, what if now people are applying for DACA as a first-time applicant, and then USCIS is like, well, we're not going to do this. We're going to deny the application. And that's going to put the client, my client, in a position where if they really want their DACA, we're going to have to sue the government. We're going to file a writ of mandamus to sue the government to, force them to do their job. And those can be very expensive. Those can be thousands of dollars. A DACA application already you can't file a fee waiver for, so it's $495, I believe, to do a DACA application, which really isn't as much, but it could still be cost prohibitive for people depending on family size and income and what have you.
It's a lot of money if you don't have it.
Exactly. So the thought of possibly having to spend thousands of dollars to force the government to do what they're supposed to be doing already might be very daunting. And a lot of people also feel like, well, I don't want to sue the government. I don't want to ruffle any feathers. I don't want them to, deny my application. But if the Supreme Court of the United States says that you can do something and they don't want to let you, you have to fight for your rights. We can't just let that stand.
Yeah, it sounds like, statements like that are sort of a blunt attempt to discourage people, right? For that, for that very reason. I think that's probably one of many, but at least a fair reading of that type of statement. So, Alicia, I want to talk to you a little bit about I guess I'll just cast myself in the role of moderator since why not? But
are you gonna ask me why my eyebrows just stay permanently on the up when Bianca is telling us these things?
Listen, I won't ask you that if you don't ask me why I didn't wash my hair. You have to watch our live stream from yesterday in order for that to make sense. Sorry. I'm reflecting on the conversation that the three of us were having before we came on the live stream. I am reflecting anew on the summary that Bianca just gave us about just sort of the history and the context, sort of putting us into context right now. And I am feeling a real sense of urgency around the work that we do, which is legacy and estate planning work. And I'm wondering from you, what do you see as some of the legacy issues here? Legacy being the goals of family, sort of the reason why we're here, and the reason that we do what we do, and the stories that we want to tell with our lives. And yeah, I'm thinking about how does this go together? Because it really feels like a sticky moment for both immigration and legacy and estate planning. And I'm really interested in your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I kind of see it as, right now the image that's coming to mind for me is of a capital letter Y. And so it really does feel like if you were in a position of trying to build legacy for your family, you were in this moment of immigration, if that's also part of your family legacy, you were trying to figure out, how do I go down the path of two of the upper legs of that Y at the same time? How do I even accomplish that? Or how do I even pick which one to focus on? Because you're really trying to focus on building your legacy and family story here. That is why you are here. And you're also trying to plan for whatever game of whack-a-mole is going to pop out of this administration, or even the one to follow it, and the immigration policy. That one of the tragic things, I think Bianca said it, of we got a Congress that's not doing their job, and so leaving us with an executive that's just kind of doing stuff, but it's all just post-it notes on the wall. And so somebody can run by and snatch it off, or the adhesive can just wear off and it just fades away. And so you're trying to say, how do I build a house where my wall is made out of post-it notes, basically? Because that's when I'm thinking about this, that's what I'm hearing you say. And so from the legacy standpoint and the tools that you have in place, it is very much I'm trying to plan my full legacy. Typically what we tell people when we're doing our legacy planning is we're capturing this snapshot in time right now, knowing that life is going to change. But when you layer on these immigration pieces that are just so hostile, that it's capturing this snapshot in time, but also having to give a view of what does that look like if I'm not in a position to make those changes, not because I've passed away or even because I'm incapacitated, but because some of these immigration issues have popped up. And so this is the plan that I need to execute right now.
Yeah, what if I get deported?
Yeah.
What if because we know that the forces that oppose some of these immigration policies will continue to oppose them, right? And we have seen successes in those oppositions before. I mean, one we were just talking about, Bianca just explained that the expansion of DACA to include 2010 and to include the parents of folks who arrived in the U.S. as children, that those were rolled back already, right? So what happens? Like what happens in a moment when all of it, and I mean, and if it's feeling like a lot for me, who I don't have a U.S. immigration story, right? Like I didn't immigrate to the United States and my family didn't either. And so if that can feel like a lot to me, how must that feel? I'm genuinely wondering, how must that feel to somebody who is trying to process all of this? And one of the concerns that I have is about a feeling of powerlessness, because if people are feeling disempowered, then sometimes that can lead to just not acting. And I'm here to say that there are things that you can do.
Definitely.
These policies can be as crazy as as these forces will allow them to be, but we don't live our lives in the galley of the U.S. Supreme Court. We do not live our lives in the audience or of the Congress or in a congressional chamber. We don't live our lives in the anteroom to the Oval Office. We live our lives every single day in our homes, with our children, in our workplaces. And those are the things that we absolutely can impact. And so while it may require sort of that Y-shaped attention that Alicia was talking about, it absolutely can be done. So I guess if there was a word to take away from this particular conversation, it seems to me that there are two. One word is encouragement, right? That the U.S. Supreme Court decision is a big deal, and there is reason to be encouraged by that. But the other word is proactiveness. That U.S. Supreme Court decision didn't solve it all. One of the things that it said was, well, opponents of DACA, we're not going to shut down DACA. Okay, so that's the holding of the decision. But part of the reason we're not going to shut down DACA is because you didn't approach the shutdown in the right way. So that leaves open the possibility that if you approach the shutdown of DACA from a different angle, you might land it next time, right? So now is not the time to sit back. So Bianca has some things that if there are maybe like your top 2 or 3 things that people can be focusing on from an immigration perspective right now, that would really be useful for people to know. Alicia, if you want to handle it from our side and maybe talk about the top couple of 2 or 3 things that people can be thinking about right now to exercise their power on to really to plan and provide for themselves. And we can talk about more specifics of these things in future conversations. But I would really love for people to walk away from this conversation feeling encouraged and feeling motivated to be proactive. And so I'd like to give them some ideas to do that with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so definitely from an immigration perspective, last week, DACA, great victory, but as we saw with this week, he issued an expansion of the April executive order where he imposed more restrictions. So attacking people from a business side. So certain people won't be able to come into the United States with business visas, and nor will their family members. So typically, for example, if you're coming into the U.S. with an H-1B visa, your spouse and children may be able to get visas to come here as well. So he just shut that down. So while DACA is a victory, just be on the lookout for worse immigration policy to come. But don't let that discourage you. If you're in the United States, you have more options than you think. If you have DACA right now, renew it. You can still do that. I would do that ASAP because we don't know when they're going to try to end it again. No, they're going to try. Probably not before the election. It has too much stuff to deal with. We don't think that's going to happen. But if you have DACA, renew your status. If you have a green card, think about applying for U.S. citizenship. If you had your green card for 5 years, or you're married to a U.S. citizen and you had your green card for 3 years, definitely, get a move on it, apply for U.S. citizenship, because certain relatives of yours aren't impacted by the executive order if you're U.S. citizen. Also, just start the process, even if you have a green card. Right now, if you have a green card, you're limited in who you can file for unless your spouse or child is in the United States. But still, start that application process anyway. File the I-130 because it's going to take a while to get approved anyway. And what you don't want to do is wait until the executive order ends and then you want to get the ball rolling. Right now, the executive order is going to last until at least December 31st. And I say at least because in the executive order, it says it can be renewed as necessary. So we have a feeling that if he wins in November, he'll continue this executive order to continue. Although, lost my train of thought. That's weird. But to expand it beyond December 31st, possibly if he wins the election. He said that he would. Whereas Biden has said that if he wins, he already has plans on day one to implement some immigration changes, some rollbacks, and to introduce legislation that would help people with DACA and TPS. So, even though a lot of bad is happening, like I don't scare easy. All he did was add more obstacles, but it's still very much possible to, secure your immigration status in the U.S. You just have to want to do something about it. And I know that it can be very scary and overwhelming, and we do have a tendency when we have too much to think about, we just don't do anything. But now is not the time to just sit back and not do anything, because he's literally changing immigration policy day by day, week by week. There's changes to asylum happening. There's changes to work hard happening. So while the immigration laws and policy are favorable, or as favorable as they're going to get under this administration, like don't waste any more time. Just get a move on your immigration case.
Got it. So as you were talking, I was adding notes for the live stream that will hopefully show up for viewers as text on the bottom of their screen, but because, Internet Granny is still learning to internet, I'm not sure if it will, but I heard tip number 1 from Bianca: if you have DACA now, renew it. Do that. Tip number 2: if you have a green card, or if you are otherwise eligible to apply for U.S. citizenship, do that. Do that. These are now things to do. It's not like, running around with your hair on fire, emergency things to do, but doing that now sets you up to have more options in the future as efforts continue to restrict some of these immigration protections. So Alicia's gonna give us some top two ideas for some of the things that folks can do from the legacy and estate planning perspective. Excuse me.
Yeah, I think the top 2 from the legacy and estate planning perspective would be to think about the people that are a part of your legacy that you are trying to protect. And I'm thinking of this in an emergency toolkit sort of a way until you can get the rest of the plan. Because absolutely, it is no secret, since this is what I do, I want you to get your whole plan done.
Right.
And get the whole thing done. And the realities are, particularly when you're dealing with this scenario where, like Bianca said, things are changing on the fly, as it seems, with immigration policy, that there are some things that you can do more immediately and quickly as part of that planning. So the first one is protect the babies. And so one of the big concerns when you are dealing with this setup in immigration status is what happens to my children if something happens to me, if I am not only just deported, but just something happens where I am pulled in some way and involved in some legal process of making sure that I have a plan in place for how my kids are protected. And so there are documents that you can do called nomination of guardian, so that you can pick who you would want to step into that role. You can have that paper in place and have it just on file with the person that you want to do that job, so that they have the legal paperwork that they would need to, as quickly as possible, gain legal guardianship of your children if that were necessary. So that's my number 1 tip. The number 2 that I would say to look for, and this is something, because I know immigration is a nationwide concept, and so while as a California lawyer I could do it for you in California, some form of this exists in every state, which is to do a power of attorney for property and financial decision making. And what that document is going to allow for is to have somebody be able to step into your shoes as your agent to be able to take over property, financial, business type transactions on your behalf if you were not able to do that for yourself. And so same scenario of if something is going on and you get involved in some sort of legal process where you are detained, that you cannot go to the bank to get funds to contact a lawyer or to deal with the business transaction of your home, something of that nature, then the agent that you have designated in that power of attorney would have the legal paperwork that they need to be able to quickly step in and to get control of those resources to help either to help with getting you set up with the legal help that you need, but also if they need to be able to access those resources for the care of your children as well. And those don't have to be the same people, but thinking about a plan for taking care of your children and then getting a hold of those financial resources so that we can make sure that those are maximized while the rest of this is getting figured out for your particular situation.
I think those are really, really, really great tips. Those are great ideas. And what I love about the tips from both of you is that those are actionable now. These are things that, I mean, just with the things that you said, people are equipped to pick up the phone, call Bianca, call a family member and say, hey, do we have this? Right? Like, is this something we need to, I saw the lawyers on YouTube and they said we need to get this, right? And so people are empowered with this information to impact other folks in their communities, and also to get moving, because while it is not dire, this is good news. And so how to take care of yourself in times of good news is, I mean, I don't know, maybe that's the topic of somebody's sermon this Sunday, but in any event, these are things that people can move on now. I included in some of the text that hopefully somebody will be able to see, that the legacy and estate planning tools that Alicia was talking about, we covered some of those in our first and second episodes of the Legacy live stream on this same channel. So the nomination of guardian we covered in episode number 2, I do believe, and the power of attorney we talked about in episode number 1. So there are examples in the show notes from both of those episodes if you want to see what that looks like, at least a California version of it. And also those episodes have a great deal more details about those things. Bianca provides awesome, timely, and digestible immigration information on her social channels as well. So some of the things she was talking about, please look to her channels for those. Bianca, will you tell us what those are?
Sure. So I'm on YouTube. You can just search Brazen. What am I? You can just search Brazen Legal on YouTube. If you speak Haitian Creole, you can look me up as Avocat Bianca, which is basically attorney Bianca in Haitian Creole. I'm also on Instagram at Brazen Lawyer. I try to post my videos on both YouTube and Instagram.
Excellent. Thank you all so much, everybody who is watching, everybody who will see this at some point in the future. Thank you for your time. And even though you belong to yourself first, and so taking care of yourself first is absolutely the right thing to do, please do also consider the person sitting to the left and to the right of you. If this information is going to be helpful to somebody, pass it along. Let them know, because we exist in the future and there is room for all of us. We can all go. So point somebody to Bianca's social channels, to her firm website, to her firm YouTube, direct somebody here to this channel, to our Instagram. We're still figuring out how to use it. Don't judge us. We're trying. But
it will connect you to us and to all of these resources.
It absolutely will. And that Instagram channel, is it a channel? What is it called on Instagram? An account?
Page?
It's a page?
It's a page or account.
Oh, gosh. Oh, we sound like somebody's grandmama. Our Instagram is at Dahlia Law, Dahlia. Thanks so much. And we will see you in 2 weeks. Right back here.
Bye.